All right. So I have two articles for you today. One is definitely a happy, good news story, and the other is more of a fact check of a really, really stupid. Um, the article calls it a hoax, but I wouldn't even call it that. It's just really, really dumb, and that's um, the litter boxes in classrooms because children identify as cats. Because what? That's not a thing. All right. Because it's sort of like Trump. He thinks that he learns of two concepts at the same time, and so he melds them together because in his case, his brain is soup. Why other people believe them? Probably because they can't accept that trans people exist, they have to try to mock it with by they genuinely showing fear that what's next. But anyway, let's start with the good news story. This is from the publication Them, which, as an aside, was just bought out by the group that also publishes Out and The Advocate. So, a group of trans women in India helped vaccinate almost 1,500 children. And how can you say anything but this is really genuinely good news? All right, people started inviting us in, offering us tea, and asking for advice, one trans woman involved in the campaign said. A group of transgender women in India helped vaccinate nearly 1,500 children over the past 2 years as part of a non-governmental pilot program, organizers reported this week. The Saki project, which launched in April 2023, sought to improve vaccination rates and health outcomes for migrant communities in the Indian state of Maharashtra. The program was operated by the nonprofit, non-governmental organization ZMQ Development and funded by the International Health Partnership Gavi, per a post about the project on Gavi's website published Thursday. Looking to combat vaccine skepticism and mistrust of officials among migrant residents, especially those who are undocumented, organizers enlisted trans women to bridge the communication gap. Members of the trans cohort were collectively dubbed Sakhi Didi, a common Hindi phrase denoting a trusted sister-like friend, and were trained to go door to door providing vaccine information and accompanying health workers to perform immunization. Migrant families often fear authorities, especially if they lack documents. ZMQ founder Hilmi Quaraishi, I probably totally butchered that, explained per Gavi. We needed a bridge between the health system and the community. 2 years later, the Sakhi Didis have filled that role, helping vaccinate almost 1,500 children in Maharashtra by reaching about 40 households per day, according to Gavi's report. Across 3 cohorts of children, all had received at least one vaccination dose since 2023, and community members reportedly adhered to vaccination schedules more consistently. Despite early incidents of mistrust and abuse directed at the women, I knew it couldn't have been that simple. Including fears that they would kidnap and injure children, community attitudes shifted over time, some of the workers recalled. At first we were chased away, said Amrin Khan, one of the women who acted as a Sakhi Didi. Later, people started inviting us in, offering us tea, and asking for advice. They would say, "Come in, sister, sit down and talk." That's a significant shift for trans people in India who face heavy marginalization, oh my God, why can't I English today? Stigmatization, oh my God, and violence. As many as 80% of trans women in the region rely on sex work or begging to survive. Indian trans activist Abina Air told Open Democracy in 2023. The organizers and workers at the Saki Project hoped that the program would provide better work opportunities and a chance to push back against common anti-trans prejudice, and appear to have succeeded. Which is great. The children get vaccinated, which they need to be, and people's attitudes towards trans people shift. I mean, it is a total win-win. This gives trans people opportunities that they didn't have before. It helps the communities, people's beliefs about trans people shift. I can't think of any a downside to this except for the beginning where they were treated like crap. But at least those attitudes changed, which is great, and I wish more places would do something like that. Because let's face it, a lot of the reason people hate minorities or fear minorities is simply because they don't understand their culture. They might have heard something in passing by someone who is either bigoted or someone who doesn't have all the information, and they go off on that. And by the time correct information gets to them, they already are firm in their beliefs. But if you actually meet the very people that you're demonizing, and you see that these are not the horrible people you think they are, suddenly it forces you to change your views, because if you do not change your views, you're basically admitting that you do not want to accept reality. Just like the MAGA people who went to San Francisco for the Super Bowl. A lot of them who went there were like, wait, we were told this is a hellhole. This is a nice place. Because it's one thing to be told such and such a thing. It's entirely another thing to actually experience it or to meet the people that you're supposed to hate. And when you do that, you realize, oh, these are not horrible people. These are not the people that I was told they were. All right. The Saki Didis, made our work much easier, nurse and midwife Yasmin Khan told Gavi. When we went with them, people opened up. They were excellent communicators and played a crucial role in overcoming vaccine hesitancy. Unfortunately, it's not clear what the future holds for the Saki Didis or the life-saving initiative they made possible. Gavi's report noted that the project, described as a 2-year pilot program, has since ended and did not provide information about any plans for its future. Them contacted ZMQ via its website for further details, but did not immediately receive a reply. Well, that's sad. Hopefully, if they don't continue this program, that they can be useful in other ways. And again, at least these communities aren't as bigoted as they might have been at the beginning, and so they'll have more opportunities just naturally. Economic and social opportunities are slowly opening up for trans people in India, though discrimination and abuse are still common. In 2021, another nonprofit organization chose Maharashtra as the site for Kinnar Vidyala, a school providing free education specifically for trans students of all ages. The following year, the Indian Department of School Education and Literacy hired 3 trans teachers for government school positions for the first time in history. Here's hoping the celebrated Sakhi Didis can likewise start well-deserved careers in public health soon. Amen to that. Okay, so that is the end of that article. So now let's get to Pink News, which has a hoax that I mentioned about earlier. All right. Debunked transphobic hoax about litter boxes in schools for kids who identify as cats. You know, that's been going around for a while now. So either this is an old article that's just been republished, or they're only debunking it now, which is weird because, like I said, this has been a thing for a couple of years now, if not more. All right. For those who are not immersed in the toxic culture wars that have gripped the U.S. over gender identity, the idea of teachers putting litter boxes in the school bathrooms for the students who identify as cats or furries might sound like something from a fever dream. Actually, I wouldn't even call it a fever dream. I mean, that's just bonkers. However, the urban myth come internet hoax continues to hold weight for some parents, right-wing conspiracy theories, and Republican lawmakers, despite there not being a shred of evidence to support it. While it may seem hilarious that anyone would fall for such an outlandish rumor, and to me it is, often linked to the furry community, the pandemonium that has grown around it has real-life implications for trans people who are fighting to have their identities recognized and treated with dignity. For many anti-trans activists, the bizarre hoax justifies their belief that trans rights are a slippery slope to people identifying as animals, including cats or other non-human things. This, in turn, gives ground to conservative legislators that wider LGBTQ+ rights are dangerous and pose a threat to society, particularly children and young people. The urban legend resurfaced once more this week when MAGA pastor Tony Suarez claimed in eastern Tennessee that there are kitty litter boxes in the public schools for the girls that identify as furries. And the first question anybody who brings this shit up you should ask is define furry. Tell me what is a furry, because 9 times out of 10, and I'm being generous with that, they do not know. They could not give you a definition of a furry. So, but this explains why this is being debunked now. Simply because it's reared its ugly head again. This is in the Bible Belt, he said during an appearance on the Flashpoint podcast, as quoted by LGBTQ+ Nation. We have to be watchmen on the wall and say, no, on our watch we're not going to allow this. Whether it's Islam, wokeism, it cannot infiltrate our schools. Okay, but Christianity is perfectly fine to be infiltrated in public schools. Do you not see the hypocrisy? My God. And it's going to take moms and dads that are committed to being these watchmen on the wall for our children. Okay, it is difficult to substantiate where exactly the hoax first emerged. Some historians date the urban myth as going back to the early 2000s, with a particular pickup circulation in the 2010s when schools began to make accommodations for trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming students by providing unisex toilets. Okay, so how did we get from unisex toilets to litter boxes? And as far as unisex toilets go, When I go to the local clinic, you have the men's room, you have the women's room, you have family bathrooms, which is unisex. I mean, I'm sorry, why is this? This is not hard. This is really, really not hard. Anyway, since then, the claim has taken on a life of its own and became a moral panic over identity politics. Well-known figures such as Joe Rogan have continued to feed the hoax and give it legitimacy by discussing it as fact rather than fiction. Right, because we are not dealing with Einsteins here. These are not particularly bright people. You know, Hillary Clinton was right about calling these people deplorable. The problem she had was vocalizing it. Because if you're a presidential candidate, if you want to be president, you probably should call your constituents dumbasses, even though you might be thinking it. Not a good political move, but as a sociology move, perfectly legit. Although even he eventually admitted it was total nonsense. On the same pod or in a future one? In an NBC News report of public statements published in October 2022, it was stated at least 20 conservative candidates and elected officials claimed K-12 schools were placing litter boxes on campuses or making other accommodations for students who identify as cats. Okay. Now, the two things could be going on here. Number one, these doofuses actually believe it, which, like I said, is highly probable because it's possible because people fear what they do not know. They do not understand trans people, and they understand furries even less. So, yeah, mush them together, and people lose their damn minds. Furries are nothing to be afraid of. Trans people are nothing to be afraid of. It's not that difficult. You know, it's like I mentioned in that first article. If you actually meet someone who is trans or is a furry, you'd realize that you're freaking out about absolutely nothing. All right. Or maybe they know that this is made up bullshit and they're just trying to cause a moral panic. In which case, you know, it's one thing to believe this nonsense and you can just say, oh, you dumbass, and try to explain it to them. But if these people are actually doing it on purpose, that I think is much worse. Because at least the first group you can hope to convince that, you know, maybe, if not facts, actually meeting people who identify as furries. I should say identify as furries. And find out that this isn't the problem you think it is. But with the second group, they're just con men. They're just playing on your fears. There's nothing you can do to change those people. They're just shitty people. All right. Each school district named by those 20 politicians said either to NBC News or in public statements that these claims were untrue. Gee, just like they were made up. There remains no evidence that any school has deployed litter boxes for students to be used because of their identity as cats. However, there is one case of cat litter being used in American schools, but not for the reason conspiracy theorists would have you believe. Okay, I'm going to pause here and give you a chance to tell me in the comments what you think that reason is, and considering today's environment, the answer becomes obvious, even if it doesn't come to you immediately. But once you hear the answer, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. All right, so I'm going to pause for a second, or you can pause the video if you want. Okay, here we go. As Insider reported, in some Colorado school teachers asked blah, blah, blah. Let's try that again. As Insider reported, in some Colorado schools, teachers asked parents to bring in buckets filled with cat litter to act as a toilet if children are trapped in their classrooms during an active shooter lockdown. And so bonus points if you knew that, because I remember going through these debates online, and people would be like, yeah, there's kitty litter in the classrooms because of possibility of an active shooter. I mean, people still need to use the bathroom. Actually, they probably would need to use it even more so in a situation like that, because, yeah, that's scary shit. So, during shooter lockdowns, children are unable to leave their classrooms until police have cleared every room in the building, which can take many hours. The school district thus has added kitty litter and buckets to its supply list so youngsters will be able to relieve themselves during an emergency. That must smell wonderful. I mean, I realize that's why they're using kitty litter, but it only helps so much. I can't imagine it takes it completely away. All right. So that is the end of that article. Okay, so I don't think I have anything more to say, just that, like I alluded to earlier, these articles kind of work in tandem, because if you just get to know someone from a group that you're scared to death of, whether it be trans people or furries or anybody else, then you're less likely to believe this bullshit, because you're more understanding of the way things work. You understand that trans people aren't the horrible people or mentally ill or whatever you want to say people that they're trying to portray. That furries are not what they think, what these conspiracy theorists think they are, or that, or you could do that for any group. Trans people aren't the horrible people they are. Furries aren't what people think they are. Undocumented workers, because in that first article, they mentioned migrant communities and including undocumented. And same thing in the U.S. If you meet undocumented, that's why there's such an uproar. Because there are people who treat the undocumented as horrible people as a whole. And then there are the people who understand that not all documented people are horrible, because some, and think that all the other undocumented are horrible. And then there are those who actually can extrapolate beyond the particular situation they're in and understand that there are good undocumented, bad undocumented. Just like in every freaking group, there's going to be one of each. There's going to be some of each. So yeah, the moral of this video is, if you have a bigoted view against a certain group of people, why don't you learn about them? And you'll find out that they're not the scary evil that you think they are. And I'm not talking about MAGA here, because, there are some people who, depending on the situation, I should put it this way. It's like the Nazi Party. There were people in the Nazi Party who maybe didn't agree with what Hitler was doing, but they weren't stopping him either. So maybe they weren't horrible people in the sense that they were actively doing something, but they were horrible people in the fact that they weren't stopping the horrible stuff from happening. Same thing with MAGA. Yes, maybe that there are some who don't agree with everything that Trump is doing or that MAGA is doing, because Stephen Miller does a lot of it. But that doesn't absolve them from the fact that they still support this goon. So you can't just look away and say, oh yeah, I totally support him, even though I'm going to give lip service to this thing I don't like. Or I'm going to just ignore this thing, even better. No, if you are only giving lip service as opposed to actually criticizing and saying, no, I support this, but I don't support that. That at least is nuanced. But, and because we all have it. I mean, now I'm going totally off on tangent, but I've encountered the right wing Republicans who are convinced that Democrats never criticized Obama doing certain things like Libya or whatever. That does not mean that just because you might not have seen it because you're stuck in your right-wing bubble doesn't mean Democrats haven't seen something and said, what the fuck? Like with Biden, his whole way of dealing with Israel and Gaza, a lot of it was, what are you doing? Why are we doing this? So there was plenty of criticism. You just either don't want to see it or didn't see it because you feel like, and this I've noticed a lot with MAGA. They think because they worship their leader and they will not criticize him and not waver from him no matter what, that Democrats are the same way. Now, maybe there are some that do. I'm not going to say that there are absolutely no Democrats who have basically given up the use of their brain and just follow along whatever Democrats say. But for the most part, no, that's not what happens. So anyway, I should probably stop there because I'm totally on a tangent now. And with that, I will see you guys in the next video.